welcome everyone to Town Hall number 140. Got a lot of good stuff to talk about. It's Wednesday, October 15th. Let's move on to the next slide here.
So my name's John Best. 140 of these,
What's that?
It's hard to believe we've done 140 of these.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I mean, it is a lot, and I'm glad we kept count because I was worried that I'd lose count. So, because I was keeping it in my head for a while, and then we started counting them. But yeah, no, it's pretty awesome. So my name's John Best. I am the CEO and co-founder of Best Innovation Group, and actually the person who was just speaking is one of my other co-founders, Elliot Cotto, our Chief Creative Officer and longtime business partner. Many people don't know, but most of the group that's been working with Big has been working together since we were kids, when we were in our teens. So Elliot certainly falls into the category, but we like to do cool things for credit unions, and we got a lot going on right now. We're going to talk about some of that today with what we went over in the Innovation Club. And when he's here, and I don't know if he's here today, we have the great it is conference season, so it's a good chance he's not. But Mr. Mike Lawson, founder and creator of host of CU Broadcast, and just incredible media there, and just an incredible personality, understands the industry and does a good job of keeping us all up to date. And so usually when I'm not around, he's here, or vice versa. And then we have the most important other two. Well, we have our other co-host, and then we have our co-host at large, which is Glenn Sarvati. So Glenn, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Used to be
I agree with you. The topics today, I think, are far-reaching and fascinating.
Yeah, I think they're very exciting. So it'll be fun to go over. And then what I like to consider our co-host at large, which is Lou Gurley.
Hey,
So, how are you? That's quite the book collection you have there.
mm-hmm.
No, those are all cassette tapes, right?
CDs, yeah.
Oh, CDs. Okay, I was hoping for cassette tapes. All right. Well, we've got to talk about our sponsors. So we've got America's Credit Union, which lots of conferences coming up for them right now. They're in their conference season, and it's funny to think about, Glenn, but just today we were talking about GAC, which seems like it's not that far away.
I saw they've opened registration already, which
Yeah.
I think might be the earliest they've ever done that.
For those of you who've never been, it's certainly a great place to go to be able to meet a lot of people, find out what's going on. And right now, I think it may be more important than ever, given the acronym is Governmental Affairs Conference, with what's going on in the industry. Go ahead, Glenn. I see you.
Well, I was just thinking of making a snarky comment. Maybe by the time we meet in early March, the government will be open again, and there's actually government officials to visit.
Yeah, I was reading some of the articles you talked about with that, where they had furloughed a lot of the CFPB employees. They used the opportunity, and also I think even the NCUA is. I heard some rumors there were some cuts there. Haven't seen anything yet, but it's funny because I was looking into some of that, and the NCUA was actually adding staff for AI, which I thought was a good sign. But we'll keep going. So if you haven't checked out America's Credit Unions, they have so many different conferences, and one of them is going to be in the department or the discipline that you work in, whether it be marketing or lending, whether, all these various things. They have plenty of information and plenty of resources for. But the best part about those conferences isn't the speakers or the travel. It's when you get to run into your peers in the hallway, and you get that moment to talk with someone and really experience the collaborative spirit of the credit union industry. So, it's definitely a high value of any of those conferences, regardless of who's speaking or what the topics are, just because so many of your peers will be there who are, in some cases you can help them, in some cases they can help you. There's just, you can't put a price on that. It's super valuable and one of the important aspects of our industry. Speaking of deep fakes and voice clones, and I don't know if you've seen the new stuff from Sora, but it's ridiculous. The OpenAI just dropped some stuff last week. It's getting easier and easier to do these things, to really create fraud. One of the big things that's rampant is documentation fraud. You know how easy it is to create two pay stubs from ADP in generative AI that say I make $10 million a year and have made it for the last 50 years, even though I'm 55. So I started when I was 5. It's ridiculous, and it's upping the bar, and all these fraud tools are going to be so important. I think they were important to begin with, but now at this point, as things evolve, they're going to be really, in some cases, the last line of defense is going to be using something like Illuma Labs, where it has the capability to transparently identify members seamlessly via their voice. And you know, this whole thought process of something you are, your voice is the easiest one. So, I'm really proud that there's, along with ACU, but proud that they're one of our sponsors. And if you're not using something like this, that the sooner the better, because again, things are not getting any easier. Membership fraud's picking up. We had some discussion around that in the Innovation Club, just lots and lots of various fraud. And it's interesting how, the use cases for it, whether you want to generate your own employment documentation, whether you want to generate invoices for a business loan, whether you want to generate pay stubs for, a personal loan, whether you want to generate fake titles. It's crazy. I've seen fake, fake social security cards. And what's funny is when you put them together, they're all the same picture taken on a marble, counter, but AI has gone in and changed the name and the social, right? So there's just, it's crazy what's going on. So you need stuff like this, and Millennium's group are fantastic at it. So if you haven't checked it out, Illuma.cx. Let's keep going. All right. So for those of you who, well, actually, you know what, Glenn? You attended the last one. Why don't you talk a bit? You were there.
Well, I think a lot, as you said, a lot of what we're going to be talking about around quantum was something that was from the roundtable discussion. So I think the power of the conversation will kind of demonstrate itself, because we had a great guest speaker from IBM talking about quantum computing, who had real-time information about some use cases that are, suddenly making this much more of a here and now kind of proposition as opposed to a concept in the future. So, I mean, the bottom line is I think it's a great opportunity for a kind of, curated and very small group discussion that can be very impactful. And I would strongly encourage, if you're not familiar with it already, to at least explore the opportunity to join. But we're going to get into a little bit of the output of the one we had in September in just a few seconds.
All right. So if you're interested, hit the QR code there, or just go to our website. I cannot say enough how important collaboration is right now with where we are. We just have never seen technology emerging like this at this speed. We had one of our partners, a former sponsor of this show, Payfinia. Basically, he went from nothing to a product in 7 weeks using AI programming. But the more impressive part, with 16 running clients, and they presented at Finovate. So, Glenn, I know you were there for that. So yeah, it's just great. But yeah, I'm surprised or I'm not surprised at the pace of things, but I know that a big part of the solution is collaboration. So that's what this is. It's hyper collaboration that's directed in a way that will benefit you and your groups. It's about sort of knowing what's coming, and not necessarily jumping at the next shiny thing, but knowing how to prepare for those things and what the right questions to ask are. All right, let's keep going. I think Glenn, this is all you.
This is a busy bingo week, or actually I think it's more yet last week, but as you know, we've been counting down, and as the year goes on, we see more and more, and a couple of relatively unexpected ones this time. We were flirting with Bitcoin hitting 125,000 for a while. It finally did that latter part, I think, of 2 weeks ago. So we've now checked off the box of Bitcoin dropping to 75 and then rising up to 125. And then almost instantly, as soon as it hit the 125 mark, it went the other way. And now it's sitting at about 110, 112, I think, the last time I looked. So, again, that'll be part of another conversation.
ETH shot up and then dropped back down with the government shutting. And people can't decide whether they're fleeing to it or they're afraid of it.
Yep.
So
Speaking of which, we had the government shutdown. When we did this originally, it was on the premise that the government was going to shut down in April. And we dodged that bullet and we kind of just went on with our business and stopped thinking about that. And then lo and behold, that bingo chip wound up getting turned over this time. And we all know that now. But I thought it was interesting that, after what was originally thought to be a, Q1, late Q1, early Q2 event, it actually pops in now. And then
So-
it seems like, go ahead, sorry.
no, so go ahead. You were gonna say.
Yeah, the last one I was going to say, and it didn't get as much press as I would have expected. It felt like just the way the world's running these days. I guess, it's not exciting enough news, but it seemed to last in the news cycle for all of about 12 hours. We had predicted that there'd be a merger of a couple of top 50 banks. There have now been basically two. I think the one technically fell just a little bit short. I think the second bank might have been like number 58 or something like that. That was the Synovus Pinnacle merger. But now we absolutely have it because of Fifth Third acquiring Comerica.
Yeah,
And
that was a little bit of a surprise. Now, Fifth Third, I think down is it called something else down here? Is it Truist or who is that?
no, Truist is the old SunTrust and BB&T.
SunTrust, that was it. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, this is, and one of the things I find interesting about this one is usually when you're talking about banks of this size, they, they take pains to say merger and merger of equals and all that kind of stuff. This is a flat out acquisition. There's no two ways about it. They're making it pretty clear that Fifth Third is acquiring Comerica. Comerica is obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but more of a commercially focused bank. So it's an acquisition on the commercial side, and so from that standpoint, it probably doesn't affect credit unions quite as much, but it does reinforce the more, and no one seems to be raising any questions about the ability for it to be approved. So, from a consolidation and M&A standpoint, it's just kind of an interesting indicator of where we are in the market right now.
And this thing that you guys put together is so cool, and we should mention our sponsors for this, William Mills and America's Credit Unions. It's particularly the William Mills organization, who has just been super helpful in helping us to propagate the town hall and get people involved with it. So just want to shout out to them. And now they just need to know they can't win, Scott.
Yeah, it's an America's Credit Union's admission to one of their conferences, right?
Right.
Maybe I can get one of those surplus guitars that John has in the background.
You could.
None of those are
for
surplus.
For you, pick one. I got you. Anytime. All right. Well, let's keep going.
The next couple slides, those are the new activity. I think we can scroll through the next couple pretty quickly. The greens are the new ones and the gray shaded ones. But to my knowledge, no one has made a call of bingo yet. But they're coming fast and furious now. So I would not be surprised if in the not too distant future. In fact, I'm looking right now at number 27. FedNow payments volume triples. I happen to know that ACH is going to be releasing their volumes tomorrow, I believe, for Q3, which probably means that the clearinghouse and FedNow will be doing the same very soon after that. And from my recollection, the way FedNow volume was going, they will have already tripled from last year. But let's see what happens. They'll probably announce it sometime in the next week or so.
I also thought we got 11.
11. No, not yet.
I thought with the Intel bump and the other contract. Okay.
Unless it temporarily blipped back up. They took a hit there early in the year, so they had a little bit of time they had to kind of recover.
Right. But I thought we'll go to it. All right.
I'll take a look. Yeah. And it's funny, dollar reaches 3-year high versus euro. I'm not sure what we were thinking back then. Because it's actually, I think, at a 3-year low.
You win some, you lose some, Glenn. All right.
I think the next slide is just more of the same. And again, some of the ones. And if anybody has a card, if you don't have a card, Madison, I don't know if you've got the link, you can pop in. If anybody I know does not have a link, please, you can still get credit for all the ones that have been called if you want to create your own card. But there's several of these, like I say, that were probably on the cusp because a lot of them really required the full year's worth of knowledge before we'd see if they were really going to happen. Like mortgage rates. And they're still above, but we have to see. Well, no, I take it back. I think they may have dipped just a little bit below 6.5 now. And I think we're probably pretty close to 10 bank acquisitions by credit unions, too. I got to check that one out. Anyway, today's topic, and I think the best way to start this up, Madison, if you've got that link, John, I thought it would make sense to run that video that Sean shared with us up in Corning, New York,
Oh
from
my goodness. Yeah,
HSBC.
it's nuts. Yeah, let's do it. This is crazy.
We believe that quantum technology is going to have a very significant impact on the financial services industry. It's a very exciting time within this field because we're at this point of discovery. We're trying to forge a path that there is no blueprint for.
The partnership with HSBC has been about how can we use quantum computing to look at problems in the financial space.
Quantum computers are starting to become useful tools to explore modeling of financial markets, and in particular in the quantitative investment space.
Algorithmic trading refers to using computer programs to automatically execute trades, usually with predefined rules, market data, and certain strategies. And this is done with almost no human interaction.
We're able to work out a problem that we actually have in real-world trading. So this is something that we do thousands of times a day already, and that's estimating the likelihood of winning a trade.
The business problem concerns the optimization of trade orders of corporate bonds and how likely they would be executed. And the estimation of that likelihood is unfortunately exposed to significant errors.
What we've demonstrated here is the ability to do something with a quantum computer in a hybrid workflow that we just cannot replicate using classical computing alone. What we've effectively shown here is up to 34% improvement in predicting whether an order will be fulfilled. We aren't able to compare to that number using classical only methods. And what that ultimately means is increased margins and greater liquidity. This is the single most important achievement of the HSBC Quantum program to date.
Working with HSBC, I think, is one of the best examples of us putting science and practice together. Algorithm trading actually uses a lot of advanced computation to do the problem. And what they're doing is a big optimization problem. And what the team has done is injected into this optimization a quantum algorithm that looks for patterns. And since we know that quantum is better at finding certain types of patterns or structure, this is a good candidate of exploring quantum computing for industry applications.
We got together a global and interdisciplinary team of experts from HSBC and IBM that really brought together a unique set of skills from quantitative finance, trading, data science, and AI to quantum algorithms and hardware. The exciting part about this collaboration, and in particular this project, was to directly work with the algorithmic traders that work with these models every day and know their limitations. They really understand the problem at the heart, and this inspired also the way how we would approach going in from a quantum perspective.
At one point, there were 16 physicists and AI machine learning researchers working around the clock, trying to achieve the same thing that the quantum computer did.
This achievement is important because it's the first example of using quantum on real industry data. As our systems get bigger, faster, and more performant, and as we start to discover more algorithms, we are only going to see more and more of these examples.
This is the beginning, but it is also our most tangible demonstration of just how close we are from extracting value from quantum computing.
Key phrase I heard in there is we're only going to see more and more of this.
Yeah, there were a lot of really important key phrases in that. I think, to date, from HSBC, that, definitely lets you know that they are, heavily involved in looking into this. I didn't even know they were working with them until, and I guess we should tell the story of the Innovation Club if you want to, Glenn.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and it's not part of this video, but Sean's openness and the whole notion that that IBM is making 10 minutes of this time available.
Let's catch everybody up on.
Yeah, why don't you? Yeah, you can obviously do it a lot better than I can. Please do.
Sure. So at our Innovation Club, the whole point of it is to look at things that are not the near future, because we figure there's plenty of people doing that. It's more about understanding the longer term. And, to illustrate that point, we were looking at OpenAI in 2017, long before they ever released any LLMs or anything like that. And in this case, we've been talking about quantum from the perspective of security for several years now. If you go back in the podcast, there are some amazing podcasts with Roger Grimes that I highly recommend you go listen to. And, initially the quantum sort of education and concern was around the idea that quantum as a technology poses a big security threat in the sense that its ability to factor large prime numbers very quickly will break most asymmetrical encryption schemes. And what's interesting about that is people think about like hackers breaking in and seeing things. No, it's more like it's going to be more like they're able to predict the key sequence and jump in the middle of it and pretend they're part of your world, which would be scary. So these are things that are very troublesome from that perspective. But what we hadn't been talking about up until the last about year and a half is, what does quantum computing mean beyond that? What is it beyond just a way for state actors to break encryption and perhaps behave badly? And I noticed that there was a trend going on. So the first one was Microsoft released a quantum processing in Azure. And, it was one of those things where, my whole life I said, oh, there's some technology. Let's jump on it. I'm sure we can figure it out. We got YouTube videos and all kinds of stuff and AI. And so we spent some time trying to come up with something just to see if we could write anything in it. And to be honest with you, we did not succeed, which is maybe the first time we couldn't at least get something out of it. And the message there was, this is not technology that's adjacent to anything enough that you can sort of throw some smart people at it and figure it out. It's going to be technology that is a big lift from a workforce and educational standpoint. So with that basis of understanding, we set out to understand, well, what is JP Morgan and what are these people doing that are announcing these relationships with IBM? Is it AI? What are they after? And so we went and we were fortunate enough to work with Jonathan Silly, who is often on this, but I don't know if he is today. And he is...
I'm here.
Oh, hey, Jonathan. So, Jonathan, you're the CTO of Mid-Hudson Valley Credit Union, which happens to be a credit union that's populated by a lot of folks from the Poughkeepsie Quantum Facility, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of IBMers from both the Poughkeepsie area and the Kingston area.
And so Jonathan and I got to discussing this, and he was able to help us reach into IBM and track down a gentleman by the name of Sean Dagg. And what was interesting is Sean is the chief cloud architect. And man, there are so many comparisons when you think about this, but the three kind of things we realized: one, quantum is not a magic computer. It's not like Apple coming out with the M10 and all of a sudden everything's X amount of percent faster. It doesn't work that way. It's not the same kind of compute processing. They talk about classical versus this, and it's not for everything. Some things it wouldn't be terrible at. So that was kind of issue one, is trying to help understand that. When you look into the hardware, we are in the, I don't know, Melissa or Madison, maybe you can find, go look for a picture of the ENIAC. That's the original first computer. I think it's it's not the first one, but it's close to it, ENIAC. But anyways, this thing is ginormous. It's in the bottom of the Computer History Museum now, and it's huge. It takes up 2 rooms. And that's kind of where they are today, is that this thing looks like a chandelier. You saw that hero shot where the guy was looking longingly at the 2 gold chandeliers hanging from the roof in the picture there. Maybe you can go back to that even. Those are just scale models of what it takes to actually run this, and the amount of you have to cool it to a certain amount. So we knew that cloud was the way, because we're not going to be able to have that. We would never be able to even have the facility probably to support it. So with that in mind, Jonathan hooked us up with Sean, and we had a lot of questions. And so Sean came down to the Innovation Club. He brought a lot of books and resources, and he told us on day one, he said, hey, there was supposed to be an announcement, and I was super excited about it, but it looks like it's got pushed till tomorrow. But guess what? I'm going to stick around and come back tomorrow to tell you about it, because when it hits, I think you're going to be interested. And that announcement was this HSBC announcement, which was a really big breakthrough. It's the biggest breakthrough in this modern technology that we've had, with them doing something that is useful with it.
And
so,
if I can just kind of back us up on that one, because it took me a while to understand it too. They're not literally using it for bond trading yet, but they're using real world data, historical data, to go back and run their hypotheses to say, okay, if we had access to this information, could we do our bond trading more effectively? And as
yeah,
they
they used, so basically, if you had a bond, right now you have to sort of, what they're trying to do is predict the probability that a quote would be filled. In other words, a trade would occur under a quoted price. And how does that work versus what we're doing now, which takes lots of horsepower, incredible amounts of data, and is subject to a lot of volatility and often being wrong. And so, which are considered classical computing. And what they discovered was, with their first try at this thing, they had a 34% improvement in the ability to predict whether a quote would be filled. And like I said, they used over 1 million RFQs, which is a request for quote, over a span of September 2023 to October 2024. So that's the data they were using. So if the efficacy of a prediction model is that much higher, then that means that theoretically they could have been that much more profitable with each of those quotes and trades based on, whatever the maximum observed that they normally had. So they have some sort of max that they deal with in terms of margins.
And I think they did say up to 34%, but I think it's pretty clear on when you're dealing with something like this. I mean, a 10% improvement would be, I think a stunning success.
So I was trying to put numbers to that, right? And so, okay, supposedly, based on what I know, HSBC trades about $10 billion worth of corporate bonds per year with that request for quote. And the margin is 0.1%. So you make about $10 million on 10 billion. If the quantum augmented model would lead to a 34% increase, right? So in that segment, then the profit margin should go from 10 million to 13.4 million.
Yeah.
Now, that's just with that. But think about all they chose one line of business. Imagine they do that across everything. So now you want to know, why is this thing so powerful, and what does it do differently that creates this opportunity? And that was where we dug in a bit to understand what was going on and how it works. And to really get your mind around it, you've got to have some physics background. But what it comes down to is that in the quantum, down way low, molecules below that where quarks live, we're able to energize these things and almost like we do with electrons. But the difference is, electrons have a positive or a negative charge. It's a binary system. This can be both positive and negative at the same time, which creates a superset of opportunities or outcomes. Some of it, we don't know why it does it. We just know it does. And you've heard this story before with the LLMs, which is fascinating. So, but we wanted to know, how real is it? And so we sat down, and he actually took us into, which, by the way, anybody can do this now. So if you're interested, well, one, make sure you put that, Maddie, please put the video link out there. And then the other one is, let's post the quantum link to sign up. But Jonathan, I don't know, are you in there right now? You want to share your screen on
I can get in real quick. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, why don't you do that, and I'll
hold on one second. Yeah, I'll get in there.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about what Yumi and Harry are working on. So Jonathan's part of our innovation club, and so is Corning Credit Union. They have a really brilliant guy along with Jonathan that has been working on this. But so we wanted to see if there's something we could do and where it might go. And because if JP Morgan's looking at it, if HSBC's in there, We know other banks are you got to bet. And there are other providers of this technology. Google's chasing it. So is Microsoft. So are the big Chinese companies. So, this is an arms race, but the arms race for them is really more about, the security issues and whatnot. The second arms race is going to be for what you just saw. What, if you can run a job and increase your profit by, that much, that's pretty massive. And you got to remember, again, we are in the early, I mean, these things, they're so big and they're not going to be like this forever. Anything that we do, Roger Grimes has a saying, anything we could build one of, we can build 1 million of and make them smaller, which has so far been right about pretty much all the technology we've ever invented. So if we can get this, once this gets to a point, and actually the charts we saw from IBM had them up to in 20, way out into the future, crazy amounts of what they call stable qubits. And I don't think you can even wrap your mind around what kind of computing that would be, because right now, just the job that HSBC ran, it would take all the computers on the earth 10,000 years, right, to figure this out. And the answer is, well, then how do you know the answer? Because it's a one-way hash in a way that they can do a proof for it. But it's honestly absolutely amazing, where they're at. But the thinking on it is really crazy. And so we set out, we being me, Harry, and Jonathan.
John, I have it up, but I don't know if I have rights to share.
Madison, can you give him rights to share?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, dude. I might just have to make you a co-host.
Yeah, make him a co-host. That's fine. So, yeah, there you go, Jonathan. You should be good now.
Okay, cool.
All right. So, Jonathan, I'll let you talk through it a little bit. It's been wild to
Yeah,
watch
hold
you
on a
guys
second. Let me just pull up what window is this?
Well, my recollection while you're doing that is they've got about 5 or 6 kind of very serious collaborative clients who have gone in big time on this. But the point that I thought was fascinating is, and obviously it's a great way to kind of prime the market for it, is that IBM is making 10 minutes per month of this computing capacity available for free, effectively, for anybody to kind of sandbox it. And I didn't have a sense for what 10 minutes a month actually meant. John, I know you've kind of started to kind of play with that already. Here we go.
So this is the system you get 10 minutes a month free on. And it's like nothing you've ever seen. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure. I don't know if the Zoom has.
We're seeing it.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we're seeing it.
Okay, good. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. They have they have their, so I guess take a little step back. So none of this is real time yet. And I think that's important, is that, the quantum computing workloads are not running on any kind of like real time streaming data. It's all in batch processes. So you get 10 minutes a month of quantum computing CPU time on some of their slightly older generation processors, but still more than enough to play around with. And I think one of the coolest features is what you see here, which is this, it's basically a quantum computing simulator, which is, it's really cool. And so what it'll do is, I can't remember, John, do you remember how many qubits this simulates up to? I think it's
4. You got
30s.
0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 there.
Yeah, but I think there's ways you can simulate up to.
Yeah,
can't
you
remember.
can have more.
Yeah. So, and basically, you're in these quantum algorithms, and John, you may have one that you've built out. I haven't really built and saved anything in here yet. But you can build and model quantum algorithms.
Yeah. And this is a drag and drop. And believe it or not, this works like a music. Like for those of you that know music, think of that like a clef, a treble or a bass clef. And each of those things are like notes, or different notation. And basically, if you have any background in digital systems and understand gates and diodes and things like that, there's some basis for that. But the idea is you design basically a circuit to run your data through. So you can think of it almost like an obstacle course for your data, this physics-based obstacle course. And what happens is if you do it right and you push the data into the nodes, that when the nodes collide, you get information back from them in the form of probabilities. And those probabilities are really the output from this. The difference between the probability output from a linear platform to this is when you think of like the common use case or the common analog is a maze, right? So if I were to use a classical computer to try to solve a maze, I would try to work my way through the maze. And then, anytime that I hit something, I go, can't go this way, go back and start and figure it out again. And eventually I'd have the whole thing mapped, which we can do extremely fast now. So fast that it doesn't really change anything. It's so quick that when you do it, it looks pretty instantaneous to us. And that's okay with a small amount of data, like a maze that might have, 3 or 4 permeations to get to the end. But when you get to higher permeations, when you have higher combinations of numbers, which is what you have when you look at our financial products, when you look at all the variables and everything that go into something like an RFQ or request for quote in stock trading, it becomes beyond the scale of classical computing to ever compute, because it quickly becomes numbers that are impossible for modern, for classical modern computers to compute. But the reason these things can do it is because when he drops in those 2 gates there, the ones that say 0 and 1 on the bottom there, when they measure them, then what ends up happening is that these things can check the probability of whether or not it's going to be 0 or 1 or both. And that gives you an incredibly high amount of processing power in terms of for things like where you're trying to determine probability out of a lot of data, and 2, an incredible amount of flexibility on how you design scale for modern machine learning. So modern machine learning, again, is linear and sequential and uses algorithms that are like next known neighbor or those sorts of things that they're going to seem like, I don't know, a Model T to maybe even not a model, more like a Flintstones with a rock in them for a wheel, compared to what this will do. But what you're seeing there is that music piece there. You would build your program by dropping those blocks on there. Now, remember, one of the things they said that was really important in the HSBC video was they mentioned hybrid. So it's not as though everything's done on the quantum computer. There are things that are only good to do on the classical computer. And what they've done here is figured out how to use a classical computer to interpret the logic and the information from the quantum computer. So you build your program, which is happening over on the right. When he was dropping those off, you can see it's called OpenQASM. It's a free Python library, but they're making it easy. You can drag and drop these things.
Yeah, there's the
Qiskit,
Qiskit, which is the Python library, and OpenQASM is actually like assembly for quantum.
You can see the include there. Yeah.
So I'll show the Python over here.
Yeah. So you can see the circuit. You can see that it's got the circuit headers. It's using 2 qubits. It's got the circuit measure. So he did 2 things. He put them outside a line, and it measures those 2. Then when you run your data through it, each of those acts as gates, and based on your data, you're going to be able to determine the probability of something like, I'll give you an example. The one we're working on with the algorithm we're working at, we're trying to determine fraud from a whole load of synthetic.
Correct. Yeah.
Go ahead. You can talk about it for a second.
Yeah. So we're using, there's basically, you mentioned hybrid, and I wish Harry was here because he understands,
I know.
Admittedly, the math gets,
nobody else would, so it doesn't hurt.
It's the math gets a little complex. If you're not up on your linear algebra,
And
sort
your
of
trigonometry.
trig, linear algebra, basically, college to graduate level coursework in math. It gets a little iffy. But essentially, you're taking a model, you're taking some set of sample data, and you're running it through we're running it through a random forest model for training, and you're training the random forest model based on this data, and then you're mapping essentially the data that's coming in. And so the tricky part with quantum is that you basically can only check each trigger. So let's say you have a fraud pattern, and you're going to call that's one of your triggers, and you have X number or N number of fraud patterns. The number of qubits you have in a quantum computer dictates basically how many fraud patterns you can check against at any given time, and each fraud pattern has to be encoded into a binary
into the treble
identifier.
clef, into this
Right,
music,
exactly.
And so, but what happens is, whereas the classical computing can take these algorithms or these maps, and we can run it against our data, it can find some things, but it's not great at finding like adjacent things, which is what usually hits us. And that's how they shift, right? For example, I saw some where I was telling you earlier where somebody was holding down the Social Security card on a marble table, taking pictures of it, and then having the AI change the numbers so they could send that in as like, hey, I took a picture of my social and here it is for identity. But the hand was the same in every picture, and so was the marble background. So what's the answer to that? Well, it'll take me 2 seconds to catch on to that and make the hand a different hand and make the marble slightly different. Enough to probably get through a classical computer. But that won't fly with the quantum computer, because those variations, no matter what they did, the lighting or whatever, as long as it sort of hits that map, it's going to give you a probability on that. And so your outcomes are that much more prolific or precise against the data you give it. So think of it like this: you could take a bunch of your data and run it through a classical fraud model and find a bunch of stuff that maybe you need to look at, like maybe 20%. You run the same thing through a quantum model and find another 50%, and eventually get to the point where it'll even tell you how to influence people or how to influence the system, so whatever system you're using, so this won't happen, which is crazy. I don't know. I don't think we're doing it justice.
Right, and I think the trick is that in traditional data streams, you're basically searching for these patterns in a very linear way. So you have all these patterns, and you're just checking one pattern after another against. So you have a transaction, and you're basically just running through every pattern that you want to try and find over a transaction, and it's very linear. Whereas with quantum computing, because you have you have entangled particles
you have particles that have superposition that can check both
because
things at the same time.
Exactly. So it's you're still having to iterate over a series of patterns, but you can essentially speed it up by an exponential amount, because you can process far many more pattern matches at the same time, because each computation is essentially taking in multiple possibilities versus a single match. Every run it can match against multiple patterns at the same time. So you can look at the math, and if you're a computer scientist, these are the the sort of big O notation kind of problems where you're looking at algorithmic time complexity, and you're essentially going from, a exponential amount of time, or at or linear at best, but exponential at worst out of time to process these kind of pattern behavior, to something that is getting much more towards a logarithmic function almost. So it's substantially faster
Well, it's like
to process these.
Yeah, so I decided to try to explain this to ask ChatGPT here. So here's a quick, easy pattern. You've seen this one, Jonathan.
Yeah.
The email changes on the account, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then right after that, a new ACH payee is added. So that is a common, somebody hacked it, and the first thing they're going to do is set up their ACH to try to get the money out, right? And so our classical computers look for this pattern, and if they find it, the signal is there. That's what we call this signal. And and then we go, hey, you need to look at this account, right? And that's it. It works, but the challenge is it's all about like, okay, well, did they change their email 2 years ago, and now it's there's timing between it. Did they do it on a different device? There's so many other things that you could add into that, right? And the reason it's hard is because the useful signals can be high dimensional. In other words, a tiny shift, like I said, you change the marble on the background. You don't change the email, you change the cell phone. Or, these things can, you don't find what you're looking for, right? So the fraudsters change strategies and off they go. Where quantum computing, they actually see it much more as a high dimensional. So they see, hey, I'm looking at everything that changed on this account at once, all of it, anything, including the device, including the IP address, including the time of day, including so many variables that you could not possibly run that through. You couldn't afford to run it through a classical computer, right? So it creates this incredibly large vector surface that can be amplified and encoded into that thing that Jonathan's showing. And then it can show relationships that you didn't even know exist. So, wow, I had no idea. You might find that like 2 bad Mint logins or 2 bad, 2 bad Mint logins means they're trying to hack it. Like you would, because they go low and slow, you wouldn't have noticed it, but this thing can find it because it has a variational classifier, which means it's able to understand joint patterns, but it's even able to understand, after seeing that, it's able to be deterministic on other joint patterns. And so more subtle correlations, because these particles are entangled, that's why they call it entangled. Think about that. That's really the word for it, right? Like the email change and the ACHP, which I know everybody here has to have experienced. That's an entangled signal. That's 2 things that happen that mean something. It's subtle correlation, but it's there. But there are probably 10,000 more of these that we can find, right? So we send it through this thing, but it's not going to tell us for sure. It's not going to come back and say, yes, for sure, kind of like a linear or a classical computer. It's going to say there's a high probability or a low probability or, a probability of this. And then once you have those sorts of things, then just like HSBC, your probability of finding novel, similar approaches goes through the roof. But right now, it's like, if you had a lock and it had, 4 numbers on it that you had to guess, that's, how many do you have to, I forget the numbers on that, but you have one more digit and it's gone up exponentially.
Right.
And that's exactly kind of what it's capable of doing, is this shortest path through that. And, other systems just can't do that. So it's got multi-way interactions, and it doesn't need as much labeled examples. So you give it that one, the ACH and the email, and all of a sudden it's going, okay, well, I'm going to check every And I'm not just gonna check a 1 and a 2. I'm gonna check a 1, a 2, a 3, a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5. Like, is there some other correlation that we don't know about across all this data? And that gives you higher anomaly scoring and better algorithms. Now, here's the cool part that Jonathan was alluding to. So let's say you figure out these patterns. Well, once you know the pattern, you can actually still run a classical computer to go take care of it, because the classical computers problem is not the being given patterns and then being able to find things. It's creating patterns. That's its problem. We have to do that, or you can do it, but it's not easily. So by allowing this thing to find all these things, then now you can set up traps or gates to catch this stuff with your normal computer. Does that make any sense, or was I way off? I'm sorry, I've been fighting a little bit of a migraine. So well, let's ask Glenn, because I think it makes sense to you and me, Jonathan, but we're not normal.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, and I think, John, this was something we talked about early on at when we were with the Innovation Club meeting, is that it really, quantum computing is not just taking your code and writing it in a new syntax or writing it in a new language. It does take, whether it's training or whatever you're learning to really understand how it works, and you really have to think differently about the algorithms and how they work between a classical and a quantum computer, because they are not the same thing. It's not as easy as just taking your C language program and turning it into a Python program. They're fundamentally different sort of logical flows, and so it takes a certain skill set to do this. And I think that's the one thing that people need to realize. And I think what sort of HSBC's investment was alluding to is that it requires a specialization to do this, and it requires a different way of thinking. But once you can wrap your head around that way of thinking, it can drastically speed up the performance of basically processing of unstructured data, and that's where this really kicks into high gear.
Yeah, because at some point, rather than spending all your time trying to design the algorithms, you're actually just spending your time labeling the data. And here's the interesting thing. So let's take that HSBC gain and try to push it towards an example in the grading space. So let's say that your fraud model detects 70% of the fraud events, right, at a X false positive. So some of them are not right. But now you run this quantum augmented model and you get the same improvement that HSBC got on their model, 34%. So that means that if you had 1,000 fraud events in a year, before you were detecting 700, which means that presumably that other fraud events, or another, of that 300 weren't detected, right? With this, you now are detecting 938, right? And presumably, if you can stop the fraud, meaning that you're able to intercede and it doesn't happen, so you're able to avoid it, and your average loss right now in the market's about 5K against that, that's $1 million of avoided losses, or close to it. So that's the thinking. But that's just even like right now. That isn't what it's going to do 6 months, a year, and 2 years from now. If it's doing 34% to begin with, then the only way to go up is up. And so we're here just to tell you that it's interesting and it's something to keep an eye on. Nothing to do right now other than watch us. But if you're interested in getting involved and want to learn more, the Innovation Club is here for you. And Jonathan, I know we could use more brains.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing. And so I just relabeled this. So like what I have on my screen now is basically a quantum coin flip program. So what you're seeing is, up here is you've got this. You kind of have to get used to the symbology of the platform, but this is basically a reset function, and this is what they call a Hadamard gate, which is essentially a way to get to force a qubit to become a 0 or a 1. It basically creates a binary state out of entangled qubits. And then this is what measures the qubit. So when you do this entanglement, and that's really what is going on at the CPU level, the hardware level, it has an equal probability of creating a qubit that has a 0 or a 1 value. And then essentially it's now you have a measurement function that's saying, okay, so I just entangled this qubit. What is it? Is it a 0 or a 1? And what you see down here is out of 1,024 simulated runs of this operation, essentially I had almost a 50-50 representation of heads and tails, of zeros and ones. Not quite, but it's pretty close to the 50-50 that's ideal in a truly random simulation. So essentially, you're creating an entangled state with a qubit and then measuring it and saying, okay, do I have a 0 or a 1? And that's kind of what's happening when you're looking for patterns.
Or a 0-1, or
right.
Yeah.
So
that's where the real power comes in, is when it could be both.
Correct.
Which is hard to get up your head around. How is something?
Yeah, it's a strange concept.
Jonathan, let's see what Scott has to say. I think he understands this. I think it clicked for him, and he's going to tell us what to do here. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, this session makes my head hurt. I'm glad there are people like you guys taking a look at this and helping to explain how it might impact the rest of our lives. Jonathan, I thought the last example of the coin flip, the closest example in my head was financial planners doing a Monte Carlo simulation, on portfolios. But it's from what one line that struck me from the video was we're just now being able to show some value, or something along that. And I thought, well, shouldn't somebody be thinking about value before we build the thing? But maybe not.
I think that the interesting thing there, Scott, is that they were building. It's kind of I think the business use case kind of grew, and this is for a lot of things. Early on, this was it was purely an academic pursuit. It was like, okay, what can we make these things do? And it was all universities and educational institutions saying, all right, what can I do with this thing? Like, can we just make it work? And then, and Sean sort of mentioned this, the next application that I think is already kind of evolving past what we're seeing, with like HSBC, is in like the biosciences fields where you're looking for novel proteins, and that sort of thing, where essentially all you're doing is just trying to create just massive numbers of permutations of different things and seeing what works. And then they finally, I think what's interesting and kind of to your point is, they had some very specific use cases, and then they slowly started to figure out, it's like, well, maybe we can use this for some batch processing data to look for patterns. And that's where the real commercialization has started to sort of dawn on companies like IBM or Google or Microsoft. I think the one thing that's a bit of a challenge right now, well, there are two challenges, and I think this is why they're saying we're just starting to see maybe that this is useful in sort of non-academic or non-life sciences fields, is that one, they still don't have real-time processing capabilities for these, which means you're not going to be able to send a data stream at this thing and do really, really fast checking for fraud against data that's streaming through a quantum algorithm. And two, and Sean talked a lot about this is really the resiliency of the actual quantum bits, the qubits in these processors, the fault tolerance, as they call it, where essentially you can entangle them, but that entanglement degrades over time, and once it degrades, your results become far less reliable. The probabilities become essentially useless. And what they haven't quite figured out yet is how to keep the quantum particles entangled for very long periods of time, to make long running processes very accurate and reliable in terms of the data output. And I think those are the physics problems. Those are the science problems that are really kind of being worked on to try and make this more viable.
Yeah, so one of them is
I appreciate that explanation. I have to slip off, but good discussion. And Jonathan, I get where it's coming from, and I guess what we're seeing is colliding of technology with how do we apply it in a business.
My thought is that's kind of what R&D is, isn't it? I mean,
right,
you're going to have failures, but I think there's enough confidence that there's something out there somewhere where we're going to figure out, and this seems to be the first. Hey, there's a there.
Yeah, I posted a great video if you haven't seen it. It's about the company called AlphaFold, and there's an excellent whole documentary on Prime. I think I showed it to you, Jonathan. That's ridiculous about what they went through. So anyways, we hope this, I don't know, confused you good. That was our plan. And,
it's very cool stuff.
Yeah, maybe you're crying now. I don't know. A little bit sad.
What I came away with, and I don't pretend to understand this either, but the idea that it's going to take collaboration. Maybe HSBC, maybe JP Morgan can do it alone. Whether it's the Innovation Club that does it, we even talked about this. This feels like a QSO waiting to happen.
It does.
Agreed.
And the thing is that it's all about risk and reward, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, anytime you can get a third reward out of it is a pretty good reward.
And I do give companies like IBM credit. Historically they've been very good about trying to invest and develop novel technologies, and this is one of those that definitely you don't always see the light at the end of the tunnel. You think there's something there, but there's still a lot of like, gee, I really hope this works out. And I happen to live very close to their quantum computing center. And, they've dumped over the last year or so $500 million into that site for quantum computing. And, companies, whether it's Google or Microsoft or IBM, they're putting a ton of capital investment into a technology that, is still yet to pay off, but they hope it will. And I think that's one of the neat things here is that, maybe there's not always an end goal in mind, but these companies are going, okay, we have the foresight to see there's something there, and we're willing to make the investment to try and get to that use case.
100%. And I want to thank Jonathan. I didn't tell him I was going to do this to him. So Jonathan, thank you for just being you. I appreciate it.
I see an interesting comment from Rob in the chat. I mean, yeah, I kind of had that same thought as, it's that race to table stakes again. If everyone has this capability, or everyone, the big guys have this capability, the big guys have an enormous advantage. And, we're going to.
Yes, exactly, Rob. And I think you're spot on, is that if when quantum computing gets to the point where it can be real-time streaming, high frequency trading is the magic application for this kind of technology. Like, back to when people tried to do algorithmic trading and it didn't work out so well, but they didn't have anything like quantum computing. And I think the HFT shops are going to go nuts when this gets to a more real-time capability.
Well, and it's, we were talking about this. We had this very same discussion, Rob. And what it came down to is it's a lot like F1 at that point. Everybody's got a real fast car, right? It's going to be down to, your engineering on the classical side and how you implement it, and your secret sauce for this or that. Yeah, it's how you drive in the ring. Yeah,
I was thinking the same thing. It still takes some human talent.
Right, and so
that too.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, I don't want to keep anyone any longer, but And
Good
Jonathan,
stuff.
I think we'll keep you guys abreast. We have a meeting coming up. Jonathan, I gotta
Yep.
call you. I finished my meeting with IBM yesterday, so
Oh, cool.
we'll get caught up and exciting stuff. And there's a lot of great videos that probably do even a better job of explaining this out on YouTube. So please, I would go look. You need to know something about it, I guess, is the way I look at it, because it's going to have such an impact on finance. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.
Very good. Thank you.